At 3:17 a.m., a full 31 minutes after I'd fixed the issue that was crashing the inventory reports, Caleb, the VP's son and my newly assigned strategic supervisor, slid into my Slack with a thanks, Marcy, and a cowboy emoji. Marcy, I've worked here for 11 years. I've authored 3 of our internal compliance frameworks. I'm the reason the auditors give us a wink and a nod instead of crawling up our back end with gloves and subpoenas. But sure, Marcy, I didn't reply. Not because I'm above it, but because I was still trying to figure out which part of his sentence offended me more, the wrong name, the emoji, or the fact that he clearly didn't know what I'd done. The problem wasn't even an inventory. It was a permissions cascade in the token vault. But he wouldn't know that because Caleb doesn't read. He forwards. That's been my life for the last few years. Quietly babysitting systems no one understands but everyone depends on. I call it being the invisible backbone, only noticed when something snaps. Otherwise, people assume the lights just turn on by divine favor and digital pixie dust. Speaking of things people assume, most listeners don't realize how much it helps when you actually subscribe and like these stories. I know, no one wants another pitch, but it tells the team someone out there's listening. That weirdly does keep us going. So if you're enjoying this so far, maybe hit that little button. No pressure, just like I tell myself when the whole company's payroll pings through my compliance logs and no one bothers to say good morning. Anyway, back to the real circus. You'd think Caleb being installed as my supervisor was the main insult. Nope, that was just the prelude. The real slap came during his first leadership meeting. We were reviewing quarterly targets. I had flagged a third-party vendor, NextPath, for not passing SOC2 verification. Pretty basic stuff. Caleb skimmed right past it, cracked open his LaCroix, and said, "We're moving fast. If legal hasn't flagged it, it's good enough. Besides, Mary's just cautious." Cautious is what you call the coworker who won't let you set your passwords to 1234. Cautious is what you call the woman who triple checks her work because she knows one mistake will be branded as incompetence instead of human. But I smiled, like always, because no one in that room cared. Most days I didn't mind. I wasn't here to be liked. I was here to make sure the building didn't burn down and to keep a paper trail in case it did. I had learned early on that respect in corporate America doesn't go to the one who does the work. It goes to the one who presents it best, preferably with a strong jawline and a golf handicap under 8. And Caleb was great at presenting. He'd show up in meetings with buzzwords like synergize and future-proof and seamless innovation stack. No one asked him what those meant. They just nodded like pigeons at a wedding and clapped when he said we needed a new digital North Star. Meanwhile, I was the one getting pinged at 2 a.m. when the data warehouse stalled or the root certs expired. I was the one patching the access layers so that Caleb's next path vision didn't get us fined into oblivion. And I was the one who had quietly maintained ownership of a tiny little credential nobody had thought about since the last audit in 2020. The named Production Access Officer credential. It was a technicality. After our last compliance sweep, legal team had insisted that someone be formally documented as the single access gatekeeper for production-level environments. We were still small then. The CTO at the time, Mike, asked who knew the environment best. Everyone pointed to me, so they made me the named officer. One signature, one key, one set of credentials. Mike said we'll swap it out when we scale. Then he left for a startup in Austin. The role never got reassigned. No one followed the override protocol. And me, I just kept it quietly like everything else. I didn't think of it often. It was like owning a fire extinguisher in a room full of chain smokers, nice to have, but you mostly just hoped you wouldn't need it. Until Caleb showed up. Until I noticed him trying to push through major changes with a vendor no one had properly vetted. Until he smirked at me in that meeting and said, "Smile and nod, Mary." That was the moment I stopped hoping for fire safety and started planning for combustion. The all-hands town hall was a quarterly ritual soaked in awkward Zoom applause and buzzword soup. The CEO would open with some trite family metaphor, followed by sales throwing up charts with arrows that pointed vaguely northeast, and HR giving us a culture slide about why casual Fridays were being moved to Thursday. But this one felt different. Caleb had taken the stage, virtually speaking, with all the smug energy of a guy who just got a promotion for not crashing the car his dad bought him. He wore a crisp button-down shirt, his hair was aggressively side-parted, and he smiled like he just invented electricity. The slide behind him read NextPath integration, future-proofing our stack. I'd been trying for weeks to raise internal flags about that integration. NextPath had no clean documentation, no verified audit trail. Their engineers didn't respond to credential validation requests, and the SOC2 certificate Caleb waved around like a golden ticket was, upon inspection, a badly edited PDF with a date mismatch in the footer. Their domain had changed 3 times in the past 6 months. It smelled like rotten fish in a microwave. So, when he opened it up for team input, did what I've always done, I unmuted. "I've got some concerns about NextPath's access requirements," I said. "The user permissions in their pipeline request full tunnel privileges to our production stack without isolation. That's a significant risk if click. My screen blinked. The little green mic icon vanished. Caleb grinned, smile and nod, Mary. There was a pause, half a second where the virtual room held its breath, and then came the chuckles. Some polite, some genuine. You could hear a couple folks actually laugh out loud. Some of the younger guys in marketing even hit the Zoom reaction with clapping hands. Let's stay on track, folks, Caleb said smoothly. We'll follow up with legal if we need to. But the leadership team's already aligned on this. Trust the process. Trust the process. I didn't leave the meeting. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even type into the chat. I just stared at my screen, heart thudding in my ears, while Caleb droned on about cloud-first roadmaps and elastic business transformation. And behind it all, I could feel something calcify in my spine. A cold, quiet shift, because that wasn't just a mic cut. That was a warning shot. That was Caleb saying, I control who gets to speak. That was the moment I realized he wasn't just incompetent, he was dangerous. Not because he knew how to break things, but because he didn't, and that ignorance was now steering the ship. He didn't understand what a credential chain was. He thought multi-tenant meant using the same Zoom license twice. He believed passwords were a formality, and that compliance was something legal just handled. He had no idea that in trying to fast-track NextPath, he was about to wedge open a door that, once opened, couldn't be closed without burning half the company down. And no one, not legal, not the CTO, not HR, was going to stop him. They all thought I was being difficult, negative, territorial. They wanted me to smile and nod and let Caleb plug in his shiny new toys. They didn't realize the toys had razors glued to them. That afternoon, I went into the audit logs. I didn't have a grand plan yet. No big revenge fantasy, just curiosity. I wanted to know if he had tried anything unauthorized already. A hunch. And sure enough, 3 failed credential requests from Caleb's admin account. He tried to force access to a protected directory inside prod just 3 days earlier. Rejected. Flagged. Buried under system logs no one else ever checked. I stared at the timestamp, my cursor hovering over it. He didn't know the system had teeth, but I did. He didn't know that I'd written the wrapper script that logs unauthorized root attempts. But I did. He didn't know that my name, still listed as the named access officer on every server node tied to production-critical systems. But I did. I closed the logs and leaned back in my chair, watching the office lights dim as people filtered out early for some marketing mixer. Smile and nod, huh? All right, Caleb, let's dance. That night, after the laughter had died down and the town hall recording had been uploaded for those who couldn't attend, I sat in my tiny kitchen, lights off, eating microwave taquitos straight from the paper towel and staring into the void of my laptop screen. The kind of staring where your eyes blur a little and your brain tries to whisper, maybe it's not worth it. Maybe just let it go. But something about the silence in my apartment made that impossible. The kind of silence that feels too clean, too practiced, like the world had paused, waiting for me to blink first. So I didn't. Instead, I logged in, first to the credential index, then the deep vault, then a directory that no one except auditors or the ghosts of engineers past ever visited. The place where digital skeletons live, long-forgotten scripts, expired certs, buried compliance memos named things like Q2 to 2020 production access, MOU final V3, PDF. That last one was mine. I remembered the day we wrote it. Back in 2020, the audit had gone sideways. Some junior engineer had spun up a staging server using root access from an unsecured cafe network and nearly triggered a mandatory disclosure to the SEC. It was chaos. Mike, our CTO back then, lost half a head of hair and almost his job. When the smoke cleared, legal stepped in with a simple mandate, one point of accountability, one name on paper, one credential to rule the production environment. No shared passwords. No DevOps team owns it ambiguity. A human being had to be designated. That human was me. I opened the document and skimmed past the boilerplate. Sure enough, my signature, time-stamped. The clause, access rights for critical production systems shall be limited to the named access officer until an authorized and signed override protocol is executed via legal and CTO office. Current officer, M.V. Adler. No override had been submitted. No signature swap. No form, so my credential was still live. I pulled up the token tree to confirm. It was all still there, untouched. A clean, nested architecture with a single privileged path marked with a green icon beside it. Credential, MVA Pradau 001. Active, secure, non-replicated. I scrolled down and saw the log entries. 3 attempts in the past 2 weeks. All from the same admin account. All flagged as unauthorized override attempt. All tied to Caleb. I exhaled slowly, not out of fear, but something closer to recognition. Like finding your name on a document you forgot you signed. Like being handed a match and remembering the room is full of gasoline. He tried to access the vault without going through me. He had no idea what he was doing. He probably thought credentials lived in the cloud like Google Docs, drag, drop, boom. But this wasn't some web startup with no structure. This was a stitched-together Frankenstein of legacy systems, fragile integrations, and a compliance layer built on blood, sweat, and duct tape. And I was the one who held the master key, the kill switch, not just metaphorically, literally. If I flipped the right flag, revoked the right token, or even paused validation sync, the entire production environment would freeze in place. No updates, no deployments, no rollouts, just a blinking red light waiting for approval that only I could give. I clicked through to the manual override settings. There it was, dormant, dusty, but functional. One checkbox, manual credential verification mode. I hovered over it with my cursor. Didn't click it, not yet. I closed the menu and stared instead at the access feed, the internal dashboard where I could see every heartbeat ping from the core servers, each one sending back little green lights of compliance. Uptime, authorization status, like the beeps of a healthy patient on a monitor. My monitor, not Caleb's, not the VP's, not the board's. Mine, and suddenly it didn't feel like paranoia to want to protect it. It felt like duty. They could cut my mic, they could laugh at my name, they could pretend I was just a support role with no strategic value. But this was the moment I crossed the line. From passive compliance to active stewardship. Or maybe someone will listen to they won't have a choice. Because when you hold the keys to the kingdom, and the kingdom's too stupid to notice, they only get two options: respect the gatekeeper, or pray she never slams the damn gate shut. The deeper I dug into NextPath, the less it looked like a vendor and more like a damn Craigslist roommate ad with a Google Doc and a dream. Their website was slick, too slick. Half the links went nowhere. The About page was just a stock photo of diverse people laughing over coffee, and their team section listed 5 founders, all with suspiciously vague bios like tech innovator and vision shaper. One guy didn't even exist outside of LinkedIn, no GitHub, no speaking history, not even a bad Medium article. Red flag number 1. Then came the audit trail. I tried to validate their SOC2 certificate again. Caleb had uploaded it to our vendor portal with a file name like SOC2 latest signed PDF. The metadata said it was created 2 weeks ago. That's normal, sure. But the signature block was dated 5 months ago, and the issuing firm doesn't even do SOC2 anymore. They'd been acquired last year. I called their old phone number from a Burnervo IP line just to check. The receptionist told me very kindly that they hadn't issued anything since April. Red flag number 2. I started tracing their domain history. Turns out NextPath TechCom had been registered only 8 months ago by a private registrar in Delaware tied to 4 other shell domains, including one called Quick Hire Solutions LLC, which rang a rusty bell in the back of my brain. I dug through an old archive from an IT security conference in 2021 and found it. Quick Hire had been named in a quiet lawsuit alleging intellectual property theft from a cloud security firm in Palo Alto. The case was dropped, sealed, but I found a redacted filing that still listed the same IP address that NextPath now hosted their test environment on. Red flag number 3. I tried sending everything to legal. Not all at once. Just breadcrumbs, small flags, a courtesy nudge. Hi, just wanted to confirm if we've independently verified NextPath's credentials. Not seeing SOC2 on file from a recognized authority. Could use guidance. 2 hours later, my message was auto-replied by legal's shared inbox. Thank you for your message. Please coordinate through your functional lead for project-aligned vendor escalations. Translation. Caleb's admin had rerouted my emails into a compliance sandbox that no one reads unless someone's screaming. I tried another route. I forwarded the red flags to Craig, a senior analyst in risk who owed me a favor after I'd helped his intern untangle a recursive permissions issue last year. 5 minutes after I hit send, he replied, "Hey M, appreciate the heads up, but I'm being told to focus vendor reviews only on high-dollar engagements. This one's marked as pre-cleared. You sure you want to chase it? Pre-cleared, just like that." Caleb's golden stamp was enough to override every system we had, and that's when the anxiety turned into something colder. Not rage, not even despair, defiance. Fine, if they wouldn't listen, I'd keep the receipts. I started an encrypted archive on an external drive, not cloud, not synced, just a quiet little digital basement labeled NextPath background. I pulled every DNS record, every audit trail discrepancy, every metadata mismatch. Screenshotted Caleb's Slack messages, archived the failed credential attempts with timestamps. Every time I found a crack, I logged it and double-checked the backup. Then I printed a hard copy of the compliance doc that still listed me as the sole named access officer and slipped it into a plain folder at the bottom of my filing cabinet, beneath an old HR manual no one had touched since 2018. I even logged the time Caleb's intern, an overconfident college grad with TikTok hair and the security sense of a wet sponge, tried to spin up a staging clone without firewall rules. I shut it down and said nothing. Just added it to the file. If this whole thing blew up, I wasn't going down with them. I wasn't going to be the Cassandra of compliance, screaming into the wind while Caleb spun a PR story about unexpected infrastructure challenges. They were sleepwalking into a minefield, blindfolded with wireless headphones on, and I was done trying to steer them. Now I was just waiting for the boom. They called it the production cutover ceremony, like it was a goddamn wedding. Digital invites went out to the whole company, complete with a countdown clock and a blurb in glittery font. Join us as we turn the page to a new era in scalable cloud infrastructure. There was even a playlist, some generic, upbeat techno meant to make everyone feel like they were participating in a moon landing instead of a half-baked cloud migration slapped together by Caleb and his buddies from college. The company Slack lit up like it was a real event. So excited, from HR. Can't wait to see what Next Path can do. From one of the marketing guys who still thought Kubernetes was a Star Trek villain. People were already scheduling watch parties. One guy said he'd bring popcorn. Meanwhile, I was told to monitor logs silently. That was the exact phrase. It came in an email forwarded by Caleb's admin at 10:43 p.m., with no salutation and no signature. Just, please have Mary monitor logs silently during the switchover window. IT will lead. No verbal input needed. No verbal input needed. As if my job, was to sit in the corner like a forgotten Roomba and wait for someone to knock over a compliance bucket. As if the past 11 years of building, patching, and protecting this entire backbone system boiled down to sit quietly and don't make waves while the frat house rewires the mainframe. I didn't reply. I didn't need to because my preparations were already in motion. 2 days before the ceremony, I activated the manual credential verification mode in our backend access gateway. One checkbox, one click, but the implications were seismic. From that moment on, every attempt to enter the production environment would require my explicit approval. No token sync, no backdoor override, and no one noticed. The lights kept blinking green. Status dashboards all showed normal, because the system wasn't designed to warn when you turn on the brakes. It was designed to ask permission, and only one person had the authority to grant it, me. The day before the event, I got a Slack ping from Greg, our IT director and Caleb's closest drinking buddy. Hey Mary, quick cue. Caleb wants to know if you can send over your emergency override codes before tomorrow, just in case we hit any glitches. No biggie, just belt and suspenders stuff. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed, "Hi Greg, as the named access officer, I can't share those without a formal override request filed through legal per the 2020 MOU. Let me know if I should expect that paperwork. Cheers, Mary." No response. The next morning, I got a calendar invite, queued over ceremony 10 a.m. EST. Join Zoom. Mute on entry. The guest list had ballooned. Not just engineering, not just execs. The entire company, remote staff, interns, even a few board members. Caleb was treating it like a TEDx talk in his honor, complete with a countdown timer and a screen share schedule. He even had a custom Zoom background, dark blue with the words "Next Path," "Tomorrow," "Today" in block letters above his shoulder. I got one final Slack DM from Caleb at 9:04 a.m. "Let's make history today." Mary's smiling face with sunglasses. I didn't answer. Instead, I took my last sip of coffee, minimized Slack, and opened the live feed from the server room. The camera flickered on. A still, clean image, steel-reinforced door, glowing green light above the lock. I watched as a junior engineer walked past it, pausing to glance at the keypad like it was a museum exhibit he wasn't allowed to touch. He wouldn't be. Not unless I said so. Everything was ready. The logs were tracking. My offline archive had been copied to a third-party timestamping service and uploaded, encrypted, to an external backup under a neutral name. One copy lived on a thumb drive in my purse, one more in my home safe. And as I checked the time, 9:57, I felt no panic, no anger, no revenge fantasy, just stillness. They thought this day was about a launch. They didn't know it was also a countdown. And the only finger on the button was mine. Midnight always feels quieter when you're doing something irreversible. I sat cross-legged on the old carpet in my living room, laptop propped on an upturned laundry basket, the only light coming from the server feed blinking on my second monitor, green, steady, patient. The glow reminded me of a heartbeat. I'd been watching it for hours, like it might suddenly flicker and betray me. But it didn't. It pulsed like a secret that knew it was safe in my hands. At exactly 12:01 a.m., I uploaded the full compliance archive, 16 gigabytes of documentation, access logs, screen captures, credential trees, vendor trail audits, and an annotated copy of the 2020 MOU, to a third-party legal timestamping service. The platform was obscure but airtight, used by journalists and whistleblowers who needed digital proof that couldn't be tampered with. Once submitted, the archive was encrypted and hashed into a blockchain ledger, timestamped down to the millisecond. Irrefutable, undeniable. Then I did something bolder. I opened a secure email client I hadn't used in years, one I'd set up for emergencies back when I still trusted the system, before people like Caleb taught me why I shouldn't. The inbox was tied to a Proton Mail alias and routed through Tor. I'd created it during the last audit panic, and legal nearly forgot to file our vendor renewal with the FTC. It had one contact saved, the outside counsel's compliance inbox. I forwarded the archive. No message, no subject line, just the file. If everything went sideways tomorrow, if I got fired, locked out, or escorted off a Zoom call by HR with their game show smiles, I wanted there to be no confusion about who tried to stop it. not a revenge play, not a career move, just the facts. The paper trail. Let the grown-ups in legal explain how they let a frat boy hand our production pipeline to a vendor whose founding address was a WeWork mailbox in Hoboken. At 12:27 a.m., I ran the test. One click, toggle credential access to manual verification required. A soft blink on the interface. Then a notification. Status, gatekeeper mode active. All privileged requests must be confirmed by MV Adler. Last override protocol. None on file. I minimized the console and looked at the server room feed. The light above the steel door stayed green. No alerts, no changes because the system wasn't failing. It was waiting. That was the beauty of what I'd built. Quiet, obedient infrastructure. Invisible strength. No one noticed when it was working just like me. And now it reflected me completely, calm, underestimated, and perfectly lethal when required. I sat back in the silence of my apartment, the kind that sinks into the walls and makes you wonder how long it's been since someone else sat across from you. No cat, no partner, just me and the quiet hum of righteous paranoia. I knew the risk I was taking. If something broke, if Caleb's sloppy cutover bricked the environment or triggered a data leak, guess whose name was still on the access contract? Mine. They'd blame me, say I was resistant to change, that I was protective of legacy systems or outdated in her approach. Caleb would sell the board some nonsense about how I didn't understand cloud culture, and legal would nod because cleaning up after rich idiots was their Tuesday. But if it worked, if the plan held, then I wasn't just the gatekeeper. I was the firewall between chaos and collapse, the woman they told to be silent, who turned that silence into a weapon. I checked the logs one last time. Caleb's team had already queued up a full migration script. Someone named Brad T had hard-coded a deployment trigger scheduled for 10:01 a.m. I almost laughed. It read like something he copied from a blog and never tested. There was even a note, // this should just work, fingers crossed. Tomorrow, when they pressed the button and nothing happened, when that door refused to open and that script stalled mid-flight, when the Zoom room fell into awkward silence and someone finally asked why, they'd learn the answer the hard way. I wouldn't say a word, not yet. Tonight wasn't about talking. It was about lighting the fuse and sitting perfectly still, alone in the dark, waiting for the echo. 10 minutes before go live, the company's Zoom room looked like a dystopian TED talk sponsored by PowerPoint and Ego. Caleb stood dead center in front of a branded backdrop reading Next Path. Tomorrow, today, sleeves rolled just enough to show forearm veins, blazer open for maximum innovator posture. He smiled like a man whose daddy's name had carried him across yet another finish line he didn't run. We're excited to show you something truly transformational today, he said, clapping his hands once, like a magician revealing a rabbit. After months of planning, testing, and yes, collaborative innovation, we're officially cutting over to a faster, leaner, smarter infrastructure. Behind him, someone from marketing added emoji reactions in chat. Fireworks, a rocket ship, applause. My face was visible in one of the Zoom panels. Muted, labeled simply Mary A. Compliance. No introduction, no acknowledgement, just another muted square among dozens. I wore a gray cardigan, hair in a bun, neutral expression. If they looked closely, really looked, they might have noticed the stillness in my eyes. The kind you see in long-distance runners and courtroom witnesses. Legal was there too, not just in-house either, at least two faces I recognized from our outside counsel team. Quiet, watching, unreactive. The board had joined as well, scattered names, some familiar, some not, mostly there to see Caleb prove himself, to watch the show. Caleb was pacing now, hands gesturing, his voice syrupy with rehearsed excitement. Migration will be seamless. Our new vendor NextPath has assured us of zero downtime, real-time scalability, and a new digital backbone that puts us ahead of the curve for years to come. He turned to the camera and winked. So if you hear a little beep, don't worry, that's just the sound of legacy dying. Laughter. God help me, someone actually clapped. Then came the moment. The screen shifted to a camera feed, the server room, same steel door, same keypad. But this time, Caleb's hand-picked tech lead, Brad, the fingers-crossed guy, stepped into frame wearing a lanyard and a nervous grin. Behind him, a junior engineer held a laptop, ready to monitor the data push. Brad approached the door like a contestant on a game show. Here we go, Caleb announced. Countdown initiated. New era starting now. Brad swiped his badge. Nothing, he typed a code. Nothing, tried again. The green light blinked red, then again, red. Brad looked over his shoulder, confused, whispered something to the junior tech, who shook his head. The door didn't budge. On screen, Caleb's smile twitched, just for a second. A little hiccup, folks. Looks like we're waiting for the system to authenticate. Normal stuff, don't worry. Brad tried a third time. This time, the light flashed twice, a hard fail. Back on Zoom, the silence began to stretch. A couple Slack DMs pinged me privately, from Craig, Risk, hey, is that expected? From legal outside, Mary, confirm status. From Greg, IT, Mary? I didn't respond. Caleb's voice lost some of its luster. We're just making sure all our systems are aligned. Mary, could you confirm backend credential sync? Should be a simple verification. Still muted, I met his eyes through the screen, then turned to look at the server feed. Red, solid, locked. Across the room, one of the legal reps leaned forward. Who authorized credential override? She asked, her mic hot. Caleb blinked. Override? We didn't need one. Brad's been cleared for migration, no, she said slowly. Who signed the override protocol for named access? Caleb turned to Greg. Greg looked at his shoes. I thought she signed it, Greg mumbled. The legal rep's voice sharpened. You thought the override protocol requires 2 signatures, legal and CTO, and written release from the current access officer. More murmurs. Slack notifications popped like popcorn. I clicked into the logs, manually verified. Status, awaiting confirmation from MV. Adler, I said nothing. Caleb looked straight at the camera, jaw clenched. Mary, can you, confirm access for Brad? I didn't move. Another legal voice entered, an older man from outside counsel. Wait, he said. Are you telling me no one has signed the override protocol? Dead silence. Then the final blow. From the far left of the Zoom grid, a board member unmuted. Who has the authority to open that door? Every head turned. Every screen pointed toward my muted window. Only one square mattered now. And I didn't need to say a damn word. They already knew. I let the silence marinate. Caleb's smile was gone now, replaced by something twitchy and sweat-slick, like a man realizing the elevator cables were a little too quiet. Greg wouldn't make eye contact. Brad had vanished from the server room feed. And in his place stood that sealed steel door, the red light glowing like a pulsing do not enter sign to every idiot in a sport coat who ever called me overly cautious. A ping broke the tension, legal again. Legal outside, Mary, status clarification requested. Is this a credential block? I unmuted. 1 beat. 2. Then I said, 1 moment, no drama, no throat-clearing monologue, just those 2 words. Then, with slow, deliberate hands, I reached for the webcam atop my monitor, tilted it. The camera view slid down, then over, until it settled on my live feed, the one no one knew I'd patched into the security node 6 months ago. The view was clean, framed, direct. There it was, the server room door. Same angle as the company feed, but this time the light above it had changed. Green, not red, not blinking, solid green. There were no hands on the keypad. No one swiping a badge, just the door. And that unmistakable glow. The kind of light that says authorized, verified, waiting on you. Across Zoom, the oxygen got sucked out of the room. I didn't speak, but legal did. Oh my God, someone whispered. Then a chair scraped. One of the in-house lawyers stood up and pointed like I could see her. Explain why her credential is the only one that opens production. Caleb looked like a man trying to remember how gravity worked. He stammered. He assumed the migration plan included access replication. Greg told me. Greg's face turned tomato red. Caleb, you said she'd signed the release. I never said that. You said legal signed. I thought they did. Anyone check the named access document? One of the outside counsel attorneys snapped. The board members were unmuting now, one by one. Wait, back up. Named access? What's going on? Who actually owns the switch? Then, as if summoned by fate and consequence, the VP himself, Caleb's father, spoke. I hadn't seen him unmute, hadn't noticed his screen. But there he was, face drawn tight like a man watching his legacy sprout cracks. Caleb, he said, is Mary still listed as the compliance credential authority? Silence. Then Caleb very softly. Yes, the VP didn't blink. And you didn't get formal override? No, Caleb whispered. We didn't think we had to, you didn't think. The VP's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the Zoom grid like a scalpel. You launched a production migration in front of the board, the full staff, and outside legal without clearance from the one person who controls the access? I thought it was symbolic, Caleb said. I didn't think she'd. The VP closed his eyes. You didn't think. Now the chat was chaos. IT staff asking for status. Engineering leads DMing me questions. Legal issuing back channel pings like tracer fire. But no one else was speaking aloud. Not a soul. Because the room, the screen, the board, the goddamn company, they were all looking at me now. Muted square. Gray cardigan. Expression calm. Server door glowing green in the corner of the frame like the eye of God itself. And it hit them collectively with the weight of a falling vault door. I had never lost control. I'd simply waited. Waited while they talked over me, dismissed me, muted me. Waited while they built a parade float of jargon and handed the wheel to a man who thought credentials were like Wi-Fi passwords. Waited until they locked themselves out of the very kingdom they thought they ruled. And now they wanted in. But the light only turned green for me. I didn't raise my voice, didn't blink, didn't gloat. I simply moved my cursor across the control panel, hovered for half a breath over the toggle labeled Gatekeeper Override, Manual Verification, and clicked. The green light on the server room feed snapped off. Red, solid, locked. And the room, every room, virtual or otherwise, felt it. I let that silence sit a moment. Let it press into every inch of Caleb's oxygen-starved ego and Greg's sweating temples and the board's dawning horror. Let it soak into legal's side of the call, where at least 3 mouths were now open mid-breath. Then I clicked share screen. What appeared wasn't a dashboard, not a log, not a technical schematic they could pretend not to understand. It was a single PDF. Title, Credential Audit plus Vendor Noncompliance Findings, Author, MV. Adler, timestamp, 00/12/04 encrypted archive, notarized submission to legal outside distribution. In-house legal, outside counsel. Board compliance liaison, page 1. A snapshot of the credential hierarchy, listing me, and only me, as the active named access officer. Page 2, documentation of Caleb's unauthorized credential attempts. Page 3 through 10, a forensic breakdown of NextPath shell structure, unverified certifications, and IP red flags, including the borrowed SOC2 report and a known alias linked to an IP theft settlement from 3 years ago. Final page, a screenshot of my internal escalation attempts. All marked no action taken. I didn't add commentary, just let them read. Finally, I unmuted. You cut my mic, I said, voice flat, measured like a verdict, so I secured the system. No one spoke, not Caleb, not Greg, not legal. Then from somewhere off camera, a voice snapped, suspend the queued over. Now. The outside counsel lead, gray-haired, pinstripe suit, even over Zoom, leaned forward. Effective immediately. Roll back any deployment protocols. If access was attempted without override, we need to document intent. HR's panel blinked to life. Caleb, please exit the call and remain available for compliance follow-up. He started to protest. The VP's voice shut him down before he got a full word out. Now, his square vanished. And just like that, the center of gravity shifted. The room no longer belonged to Caleb or the VP. Even the founder, who finally unmuted with a voice that sounded like he'd swallowed glass. Mary, he said, can you get us back online? I looked him dead in the eye, with the right agreement. You could hear his pride hitting the floor like broken tile. Outside counsel spoke again. Let's schedule a reauthorization session immediately. Terms will reflect updated risk posture, new access protocols, and role reassignment recommendations. Translation. I would write the new rules. I would own the keys on paper, in front of everyone, and they would sign them with hands still trembling from the fallout. No one objected. I ended the screen share, stood up from my desk, slipped on my blazer not for theatrics but because the building was always kept a few degrees too cold. I grabbed my badge, walked out the door. By the time I reached the server room, it was quiet, the corridor empty. The steel door blinked red until it saw me, then green. I pressed my palm to the reader. And as the door clicked open with a soft pneumatic hiss, I stepped into the room they thought they controlled. The room only I could enter. And finally, the silence belonged to me. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him.